Hey, so let's cut to the chase. What do you do when you're in a low mood? I recently did a webinar on dream jobs, and at the end, someone asked me this question: what do you do when you're low on optimism, when you're in a low mood? And that kind of inspired me to do a video. So it's like evergreen, so it lives on my page, and then you can use and come back to time and time again if you're in a low mood, or send to a friend who's going through it. So save it, send it, share it, comment on it. Sometimes we wake up in a funk, and that funk can go after a day, can go after an hour, can last for a few weeks, can last for a few months. What to do to shake it up and shake it off? I've got one technique that works, I think, and it is basically to get another voice in your head other than your one. Because you wake up, and what do? You pick up the list of worries, the list of problems, or the list of to-do or something. You've got a bunch of things going round and round in your head, causing you thought loops and not making you feel great, maybe. Or you just attach yourself to a problem you're having and going around it. Then you should tap into a different voice. And where you find these voices are YouTube. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but this is just my suggestion, and this is what I've done and tell my clients to do. Hop onto YouTube and type in one of these names that I'm going to share with you. These are people, leaders, life coaches, spiritual leaders, authors, different scientists, doctors, other people. And these are people who have reached the rock bottom, or have had tough times, have had struggles, and have had to get through them, and they've kind of found themselves or whatever, and they share their tips, techniques, and they can be motivational, inspirational, soothing, or they share actual tangible techniques. So let's start off with the most famous one, probably Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins, if you don't know him, he's like this huge guy. He's like 6 foot something, like big guy, and with a deep voice. So what you could do is YouTube Tony Robbins and put in something that you want to hear, so motivational, inspirational, or whatever you're going through, like lost my job or something like that. Tony is like quite as an alpha male and quite a masculine energy. So he's good for those times when you want the like extra like push and shove and like, yeah, I can do it, like, kind of Rocky style. Sometimes that'll be the energy you want, and you're like, that does it for me. Other times when you're like quite low and a little bit more sensitive, he could be so irritating, and you're like, stop it, you don't know what I'm going through. And so wait, I will cover those types of energy as well. Another guy who's also really tall, but a different energy, is Les Brown. I'll write all of these in the comments below. Les Brown, if you haven't heard of him, do yourself a favor, just do one YouTube video of him. He's usually also on stage, and he's so much more approachable and funny than, I'd say, Tony Robbins. Tony doesn't have that kind of sense of humor. Les Brown is funny. He'll tell you stories about when he was going through it, when him and his family were really, really poor. And he's got this catchphrase that says, "It's possible." He's American. And he's so good to also put a smile on your face and make you laugh. And he's got the greatest laugh as well. So get into Les Brown. And his videos are quite from the 80s as well, which I like as well, recycling content. But he's still around, and all his messages are relevant to today. Sometimes you don't want a man in a suit. Those two are on stage. What you want on stage is more kind of gentle. I would suggest Brene Brown. Brene Brown, y'all, I'm not going to do an accent anymore. She's from Texas, y'all. She is a qualitative researcher who started off doing research on shame and found out that actually the way to detoxify shame is through vulnerability. She's now like an expert on vulnerability. What I love about her as someone who is on stage, so you can go for her TED Talk. I think her first one, that's the one that like broke the internet, or launched her into it. She tells stories, and she shares about how she wasn't vulnerable, how she was all about the like, let's get through energy, and how she had her own breakdown, which she calls her awakening. She's also quite legendary in the sense that she has her own category in Netflix. So it's not stand-up, it's like self-help stand up something. And she's great at telling stories. And so you'll identify yourself in her and what she says, and you'll learn so much. That's the other thing about it. It's like when you're in a low mood, yes, you can call a friend and absolutely do tap into your support network. Don't suffer alone. But sometimes what you need is just some like kind of soothing or uplifting or some kind of other energy that's like on a higher plane, if you will. And whilst you're listening to be soothed or to be inspired, you're also learning. And learning is one surefire way of boosting your confidence. So that's Brene Brown. Let's see Mel Robbins. She's another one. TED Talk. She's like sassy Boston lady. I really like her. It's like she's also funny. There's sass with her. I really, really enjoy listening to her. She's a good one. She's one that got me to start exercising, waking up really early, 6 a.m. to exercise. Since then, I have not looked back. And she's got a method. It's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. Launch yourself out of bed or launch yourself into doing something. So you could go through her. Sometimes you want someone on stage. Sometimes what you really benefit from is more of a conversation. So interviews. And so if you're wanting an interview type thing, there could be Russell Brand. He might not be your vibe. He's become more spiritual. A good one I'd suggest actually to watch is Russell Brand interviewing Brene Brown. They've got like this real chemistry going on. There's quite a few nuggets in there, especially about boundaries and shame and how to say no to friends. And they give some examples that are like really good and really relatable. So that would be a good one. Shetty, which is apparently like a storyteller, former monk, apparently a high rating podcast. I personally have only seen a few bits of him. Hasn't helped me personally, but has helped some of my clients. So that's why I kind of stick it in there. Oprah, of course. Come on, there's so much within Oprah. Sunday soul sessions she's got as well. I think, or there are some kind of videos where she's like in the middle of a forest and on sofas interviewing people about their work. But the interviews are more kind of interviews and not like something to share. Someone else, what you could also benefit from is group coaching kind of conversations. And I've got 2 for you for that one. One is a bit woo. This is from my woo clients. I have confessed that I myself am 2 parts science, 1 part woo. So the woo ones is like law of attraction. So if you are believing in that and that way inclined, Abraham Hicks, but you probably already know of her, him, it. If you don't, it's Esther Hicks, the lady who receives Abraham Hicks and channels the thoughts and the downloads, as she calls them. Even if you're not woo, I would say listen to something to expand your, stop being so judgmental. I would always say listen to people from outside your own echo chamber. Okay, even if you don't like it, there's always some kind of gems or analogies. That's what I actually really like about Abraham Hicks. She does great analogies. One of them is, for example, So the setting, what happens is she's on stage and there's an audience and people, and she picks on people from the audience who've raised their hand and they ask a question and she answers it. So they could present a problem. And they're useful because maybe sometimes that's your problem. And then you'll hear her answer. So always when you're YouTubing it, search for the person and then maybe for your problem or whatever you want help with. So she'll answer the problem and a lot of them are like, what to do when I'm like really frustrated, angry, or it's not going well, when you're just in a bad mood. And the analogy she paints is like, well, you can't stop a train going 70 miles per hour this way and turn it around to go that way on a whim. You have to slow down the train to then turn it around. Same thing with your thought work. If your thoughts are just spiraling into doom and gloom and worse, you can't just change it to go on to positive. Your brain will just reject it. So for clients who are like, I'll never get a job, it's a horrible time, it's completely uncertain, no one's hiring, blah, blah, blah. A career break will be terrible for me. I know this and then this, all of this kind of like 70 miles per hour this way. You can't be like, I'll always get a job. I'm going to get a job tomorrow. It's absolute bollocks. So, you have to slow it down and be like, there are jobs out there. And you go into neutral thoughts. So Hicks is quite good for that, but she is woo. If you're not woo, Byron Katie might be your gal. Byron Katie had decade of depression, suicidal. She finally got help. But she had an epiphany when she was lying on the floor, sleeping on the floor. And that will tell you the level of depression that she was going through, that she was sleeping on the floor because she was so in such self-loathing that she thought she wasn't worthy of a bed. If she can turn around and come back and become this like amazing author and just multimillionaire now, then you can too. So she had this thought of like, she was totally depressed, but then she woke up suddenly because a bug crawled over her foot. And you know how you wake up and your mind, and for like a split second, you're not thinking of anything. Sometimes you just forget where you are. Sometimes, it's like your brain hasn't switched on yet. And then when it does, it reminds you of the things you have to do, you haven't done, and your problems, right? Or the things you did yesterday that you should regret. Well, in that split second, she had that clarity of mind, and suddenly she was someone that wasn't depressed after having a decade of depression, and she had this like huge epiphany and saw the world in a different way. So she says that I discovered that when I believed my thoughts, which were quite negative at that point, she suffered. But then when she didn't believe them, she didn't suffer. And she has a method for kind of a thought turnaround, which is really, really useful when you are having some negative thoughts. Her little process is like 4 questions, which are, is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true? How do you react? What happens when you believe it's true? And who would you be without that thought? Those are the 4 questions. And it's like a thought turnaround. What's best to do is actually hear how she takes other people through that. So if you type in Byron Katie and then maybe just workshop or whatever it is, or your problem, you'll see her doing workshops and someone will say a problem, like, I'm pissed off at my husband, or like, my boss is killing me, or whatever. And she'll use that method. It's called The Work, Byron Katie, The Work, that for those 4 questions, and she'll take them through it, and you'll see suffering being alleviated. It's quite magical. So that's Byron Katie. Who else is there? Have I got? Esther Perel. I love her. So Esther Perel is a relationship expert, and to me, a thought leader and someone I want to be when I grow up. And she TED Talk her, YouTube her, but also she's got a wonderful podcast where she does couples therapy. So there's couples that go on with whatever problem they have and they discuss, and you kind of learn through that. Lastly, there's another 2. I've got 2 more for you. Alan Watts, on YouTube, he sounds like he's BBC English, and he's like a kind of a philosopher, if you will. And his videos is quite short, but they're all about like finding meaning. So he's really good. Sometimes you'll find soothing within him. There's another one, Deepak Chopra, all about he's more spiritual, but firmly rooted in science and medicine. He trained to be a doctor, but then he just noticed in his practice that just the things that they were being, he reached the limit of what he could do, and the limit to normal medical knowledge. So then he went and sought alternative medicine and more holistic practice. Holistic is like, looking after the person's soul and more spiritual levels. And then he noticed change within his patients' physical bodies and things like that. So again, so much for you to choose from. What I would love you to do is, if you're listening to this and you've got someone that you think that has helped you, someone you listen to, please leave it in the comments, and leave a specific episode or YouTube, Google thing if you can, so that people can get started straight away. And when you do try one, give it 5 minutes. If it's not your vibe, then you're on a different energy level. like I said, we benefit from different things. Like sometimes you want someone on stage that's like motivational and inspiring. Other times you want more soothing things and you just want to learn from other people's problems. So stick them on, give them 5 minutes, change it up if it's not working, leave it and continue if it is. I hope this helps.